Good morning, everyone. This is Max, and today I'm going to talk about the words nature and natural and what those terms mean and how their meanings have changed. And then I kind of want to discuss, how this has affected humanity's interactions with the natural world and why should we care about this. So to learn more about this, let's get started. So first of all, few words in English language have as diverse of meanings as the words nature and natural. They can mean many different things to many different groups of people, and their definitions have changed a lot throughout the history of their usage. I'm not going to go through the whole details of this. This could honestly take an hour. But what I'm going to talk about is what our definition is today, and the main component of that definition, which is basically the physical world out there, excluding humans. That's, in a nutshell, how most people, I think, would look at nature today. There's, of course, as I said, there's other definitions, so some people may use different definitions than that one, but that is the main sort of definition that society has used as the general definition. And natural means being of the world without humans. It could be also sort of behavior that is not changed from how it would be without being disturbed by humans. That's kind of what natural means. And so the main thing you notice with those two definitions is that humans are a big part of the definition. So, if the humans are involved, that means that it's not natural, it's not nature. Now, what these definitions mean is that humanity has basically been able, at least in Western civilization, has been able to isolate itself from the natural world and put nature as something else, something that we're not involved with. If something happens with nature, it's not really happening to us, it doesn't affect us, it just affects nature. That's what Western civilization has basically created. That's what they've done with this definition. And so now basically the argument is, we can destroy habitat and change it to our uses. It's not humanity. We're not destroying ourselves because we're not part of nature. That's basically this sort of thing. So by disconnecting ourselves from nature, we're making it easier to exploit nature and use it in many different ways. However, because nature has many complex definitions, you can probably make the inference that that doesn't have to be the definition, and it doesn't. In fact, I would argue with this video that that is a very bad definition to have for nature, and that humans are actually a part of nature. What we do in the environment is part of the natural world, and we need to recognize that and that we are important. So to demonstrate that, I'm going to talk about what you see right here behind me. This is a vernal pool complex that is here on the University of California, Santa Barbara's campus. So vernal pools are seasonal wetlands that have, most of that habitat has been destroyed in a lot of California. So it's really cool that the campus has these vernal pools here. But something important to know is that these vernal pools were not always here. In fact, when these residence halls that were behind me were built over here, the stuff you see behind me was pretty much just dirt. There was no plants. It was very bleak. So how did we get to having this wonderful habitat that's endangered in California right here next to this campus? Well, to talk about that, I have to introduce the Cheadle Center for Biodiversity and Ecological Restoration, or CCBER for short. So what CCBER does primarily is try to increase biodiversity in the areas surrounding the University of California, Santa Barbara. One of the main actual things that they do in order to increase biodiversity is do habitat restoration. This stuff behind me was just like a dirt cliff at one point. There wasn't really anything here, maybe just a few grasses, maybe a bush here and there. It was very degraded habitat. And so that doesn't support a lot of biodiversity. So what did CCBER do? They decided to restore this habitat. They personally planted most of the bushes and plants that you see behind me, and many that you can't see because they're too far away. And when it came to the vernal pools, they made those depressions the way they needed to be so that the water could collect and create those habitats, and they also planted all the reeds in there. Their work is the only reason that you're seeing what's here behind me. If they didn't do that, this natural habitat wouldn't be here. And now that's the thing I want to talk about. Is this a natural habitat? Because when you look at it, you think that's nature. But then if you know the story that I just told you, you realize that humans had a huge part to play in making that habitat possible. And so many people, when they hear that, might think, oh, well, this isn't a natural habitat. I would argue this is a natural habitat, even though humans were involved. The thing I want to kind of point out with this, I'll explain why I view it as natural in a second, but the thing I want to point out with this is humans are not separate from nature. We are a part of nature. We have a part to play in how nature acts out in the real world. Another example of basically the same sort of thing, which is basically what CCBER is doing but on a much smaller scale, is what Native Americans were doing and indigenous peoples here in California. The indigenous peoples in California did not use agriculture, and they did not farm animals. Instead, they relied on the natural resources to survive. And in order to make sure that all those natural resources were plentiful, they basically used fire to manage the plant communities and make it where some species were abundant, some were not. So they very much did interfere with how the environment was. They had a huge role to play in the environment. In fact, many of the ecosystems that we see out here today and that the explorers saw when they first saw California were created because of how indigenous peoples were managing the land. They didn't just leave it there and say, oh, that's nature, we'll let it do its thing and we'll just harvest it. They knew they had a role to play, and they took on that role and made the environment biodiverse and rich. In fact, most estimates say that the biodiversity of California was a lot richer. Most species were more abundant when Native Americans were managing the land the way they did, because that's just the result of how they used fire to create these communities of plants where everything was common. Yeah, some people might say that's not natural, but I would argue California would not be the biodiversity hotspot it is today if indigenous peoples didn't do that. And I would argue that having all that biodiversity is part of what nature is. So that's going to wrap it up for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you got something out of this. If you like this video, please give it a like, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos on ecological concepts or my wildlife watching experiences. Also, if you would like to make a donation to CCBER, please do. I have the website in the description. They are an amazing organization, and the work that they do out here is absolutely amazing. And their mindset behind conservation, what nature is and what's natural, is just really important for us to embrace. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.